All right, I think we are recording. I want to, first and foremost, welcome everybody to Somewhere in the Middle. This is basically where we try to connect research that's being done in academia to the real world. And my hope is that we can actually have these conversations with one another to enrich research and also to produce meaningful research to help people where they are. And today's guest is Dr. Kenneth White, and I'm incredibly honored and grateful to have him. He's an assistant professor at the University of Georgia in the financial planning department. So welcome, Dr. White. How are you?
Well, thank you very much. I am doing well today. Thank you for having me on today.
Good. I'm checking out your shirt, and it says it's a cruel. So it's a cruel world. All right. So you're already bringing in some of the financial stuff into the realm of this conversation.
Yeah.
But again, thank you for agreeing to do this, and I look forward to honestly to having you back on for many more conversations because of a lot of the great work that you are currently doing as it relates to research in general, and then also bucking the trend a little bit and exploring some nuances that we don't always look at in terms of maybe personal finance and the African-American community, all right? So as we get into this, if you will, tell us a little bit about who are you? Like, where do you come from?
Just a kid from Detroit. I grew up in Detroit and did my undergrad work there. And for the longest, I was going to be a mathematician because that's all I was good at in school was math.
All right.
And so when I went to college, I decided, well, I'm good at math, so let me major in math, right?
All right.
So that's what I did. I went to Wayne State University.
What?
I went to Wayne State University.
What? Like, say that with your chest.
A degree of excellence in the intellectual hub of Metro Detroit. I went to Wayne State University. I got a scholarship to go to Wayne State University. So that's where I went. I mean, you can't beat going to college for free.
No, not at all. Not at all. So is there a correlation between being good at math and getting a free ride to college? I'm kind of picking up on something here.
Absolutely. So I got what's called a Research Careers for Minority Scholars scholarship.
Wow.
It was for students of color and those that were particularly in the STEM fields, or especially in the STEM fields. So you either had to be an engineering major, one of the sciences, or a math major. And you get a full scholarship. They gave me a monthly stipend.
That's what's up.
And also they set me up with a professor in the math department. And that's who I kind of got started doing research with, Professor Brenton in the math department.
Interesting. So your passion and love for math, which I'm going to be very honest with you. You're from the D, I'm from Gary, Indiana. And during the times when we were coming up, it wasn't always fashionable to say that you loved math or you loved the arts, or you loved something that was outside of the realm of being hardcore and just trying to survive. So you somehow honed that and actually finessed it, so to speak, into a scholarship, and then got connected with some social capital that put you onto research. When would, in that interaction with that professor and the research, when did you actually start to believe that maybe this was something that was in your future?
That's a really good question. And I don't know if it was with that particular professor. I did get some experience doing research with him, but honestly, I didn't know what I was doing. We were studying some math, the Fibonacci sequence And
Interesting.
yeah.
I have no idea. I'll Google that later.
But it was an introduction to research, and being in the research careers program, I also had an opportunity to get to see other researchers that looked like me come to the university to speak to us. And so I remember there was a PhD in chemistry, and he came and talked to us. Um, and so that was kind of an introduction. And I wasn't even aware that I was going to go this route at the time. At the time, I wanted to be an actuary.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
you were really into math. If
I
you
was really into math, yeah. But I credit my mom for that. When I was in elementary school, she used to make me do the little flashcards before I went outside to play. And so, I would be sitting there crying like, "Mom, I just want to go and outside and play with my friends." And she's like, "Nope, you got to do these flashcards first." But it was good because when I got to middle school, I played academic games. And at the school that I went to one of the magnet schools in the city of Detroit, and we had academic games tournaments, and I used to play this game called Equations. So that's where I really started to really realize that I was good in math. And
Love it.
yeah, and that's what I did. I went to high school. I was in honors math classes in high school, and then I just majored in it in college. And I met I'm gonna tell you a story, quick story.
Please do.
So my very first semester in college, we had to take the math placement exam, and I placed into pre-calculus. And I was upset because I wanted to take calculus first semester. I'm coming in, I'm a math major. I got to take calculus first semester. So I placed in a pre-calculus. So I go to the math department to complain because I want to be in calculus, not pre-calculus. So while I was in the office, I happened to run into the director of the undergraduate program. And his name is Dr. Steve Kahn at Wayne State University. And he said, "Okay, you want to be in calculus? I'm starting a new honors calculus program for the best of the best at the university." And
he put you on the spot, bro.
Yeah. And he was like, "If you really want to be in calculus, I'll put you in that honors program. And you'll have, in addition to taking calculus, we also had to take a 2-hour calculus lab every week where we just went as a group and we solved these incredibly, challenging problems."
Yeah.
And so instead of a regular 4-hour calculus class, I had to take a 6-hour calculus class. And so I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And the first exam in Calc 1, I got 67%. And I was like, "What have I done?"
Yeah.
But by the time that first semester ended, I got 100% on the final exam, got an A in the class. And I from that experience, I realized that with a little hard work, I could do college.
Interesting.
So,
So you went from, I'll be honest with you. If I went through that entire process, right, and I put myself out on Front Street and I said, "You know what, I deserve to be in calculus," and I get into calculus, and then basically on the first exam, I kind of vomit a little bit, that would have tore me up on the inside. So please, if you will, just quickly here, please unpack how that made you feel, and then what really nudged you to believing that. We talk about hard work all the time, but you have to believe that the hard work is going to pay off.
Yeah.
So was that something that was just already a part of your mental script, so to speak, or was that something that you had to make a decision and cultivate that in that moment?
Yeah. No, it's something that I really had to make a decision at that time because I was a lazy high school student. I mean, I knew I could get a B with no problem.
Yep.
And so that's what I did, so I was a pretty lazy high school student. I will admit it. But I once I hit college, something in me just said, I can't fail. I cannot fail. I'm not going to be one of the people that go to college and can't do it.
Interesting.
And so I had a really good support system being in that honors program.
Yep.
We hung together. We studied together.
Love it.
We went to Dr. Khan. He was so caring. He would spend hours of his own time to help us grasp the material. I went to his office hours. I read the solution manual to the textbook. I did whatever I had to do in order to really do well in that class. And because I had put myself out there, I was like, I can't fail now, right?
Absolutely.
And so I got an A in that class, and I got an A in Calc 2 also.
That's impressive, man.
And later he told me that when he offered that to me, he thought he was going to scare me off, and I was going to say, no, I'll just take pre-calculus.
Yeah.
But, the opposite actually happened. And it kind of propelled me to do well in college. And I met good people, and particularly him, he was the first that really encouraged me to get a PhD and become a professor. And at the time, I was thinking I would do it in math at the time, but I kind of took a different route. But that was my initial introduction into the world of the professoriate.
I love it, man. And what's interesting about these types of interviews when I do them is that you typically find at some point in time someone sows a seed. To see you being somewhere that you never contemplated yourself being. And I think that is such an incredibly powerful dynamic. And to your point, the people you surround yourselves with, because all professors aren't that way.
No.
Like to me, you said he was he was going to challenge you, but he was going to be there to encourage you and to provide you all the tools and resources that you needed to be successful. And sometimes some of us just aren't lucky for that to be like the experience, like the pivotal moment that really drives us to be successful. Because sometimes you'll have somebody who will say, hey, you got that 68? Are you sure you want to continue to do this? You can drop the class, like, and just absolutely not care whatsoever. But the fact that someone did care and they sold into you, I think that's a powerful thing. And I just, for those of you who are out there who are watching this, that you're going to run into people who are not the professor that Dr. White is talking about, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it.
No.
Right? It just means that you might not have someone in your corner who is going to believe in you. But if you believe in yourself, you can still move forward and achieve extraordinary things. Thank you for sharing that. So Wayne State, you get your undergrad. In undergrad, you're pursuing math. You've been able to do a lot of amazing things in that space. You've challenged yourself. You've realized some things about yourself. And then you go on to graduate school, right? So what does a graduate school look like in terms of your career trajectory at this point?
Yeah, so I didn't have one of those right from undergrad to grad school stories. When I graduated here, and this is the ridiculousness of of how I was thinking back then. I was 20 years old when I got my bachelor's degree.
Okay.
And
so you got it a little bit. You graduated a little bit earlier.
I did a little bit. I graduated high school a little earlier.
Okay. So
I didn't graduate early, but I was just younger when I graduated.
You were younger. Okay.
But I was 20 years old and I was thinking, I can't go to grad school. I got to go and make some money. And so,
But that's real though.
it's
That's real for a lot of people. It's like I really need to go and to get the benefit of this education that I have before I
right,
think about making any other decisions.
right, exactly. And, given that I grew up in the city of Detroit, um, I wasn't born to wealthy parents. Um, I was very fortunate that I got a scholarship, so my parents didn't have to pay for me to go to college.
Yeah.
Uh, but I never wanted to be a burden on anybody, so I was like, I need to go and make some money. I can't just keep being in school. Um, and so, I got out of school and I worked at an actuarial firm. I taught high school math, and so I I I tutored math. I did whatever I had to do. I remember I was a calculus tutor at Henry Ford Community College for 2 months. They were like, "We need a calc tutor for 2 months." I'll do it. I need to make some money. But and so when I got my undergrad degree, I worked. I worked, and then ended up getting a job at Daimler Chrysler
Hmm.
in the
Which
skilled
would make
trade.
sense. Still the
Yeah,
Detroit metro area, so to speak.
right. And that's where I got really introduced to the world of personal finance.
Interesting.
Yeah. There was well, for one, sitting around with all the old timers at the plant, that's what they used to talk
Talking
about.
about their pensions
Yeah, they were
when they about to retire.
and they talked about their investments. And so that's where I really got interested in the world of personal finance from listening to them.
Interesting.
And then I read a book by Gail Perry Mason,
Okay.
and it was titled Money Matters for Families.
Hmm.
And we actually got that book at Chrysler. It was a manual for employees at Chrysler on how to manage their finances.
So what you're saying is that Chrysler was ahead of the curve
Yes.
in terms of thinking about financial wellness and productivity and financial stability of its employees. So there's a big movement right now in terms of, and what you've gotten at is beautiful in so many different ways, because a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now isn't new.
Right.
Like some of this stuff has been hashed out before. So I love that that was a part of your experience.
Yeah. So that was that after I read that book and that I had that experience at Chrysler, I ended up getting laid off from Chrysler. That's just the cyclical nature of the auto industry. But during that time, I was able to make, what I consider a significant amount of money for me at that time, I
You
was
balling.
rich. But
Were you still staying at home?
yeah,
Oh, so you, yeah,
yeah,
you didn't have to worry about regular bills.
right.
In this space.
Yeah. And I had people tell me, well, why don't you move out and get your own place? And I'm like, why? Why? I got all my life to get my own place. I, you know, I it was at the time it was me and mom living there, and I was able to help her out a little bit, and she was able to. It was a mutually beneficial relationship, and so what it allowed me to do was just stack a lot of cash, and so
Sure.
her position was, I'm going to do what I can to help you so that when you do leave, you never have to come back.
Absolutely. What's interesting about that is The Millionaire Next Door by Dr. Stanley. I think that the fifth principle for someone to be able to become a millionaire is to have a child who is in a basically stable financial position,
Yeah.
right? And I love the mentality that your mother had, as it relates to, as long as you're doing what you need to do to be securing your future, you're actually securing our future.
Right.
Because if you're going to be stable, that means that I'm going to have more of my resources to do what I need to do with this money, instead of constantly robbing Peter to pay Paul to make sure you're good, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in that, honestly. I know a lot of people aren't, but I think that that's a messy place where I think a lot of families mess up, is during that college time frame. Because a lot of parents step back and say, you're an adult, you make decisions. But if your child doesn't apply for scholarships and they don't submit their FAFSA and y'all don't submit that information on time and they don't do all the stuff that they need to do, then guess what? If there's a gap in the financial aid awards package, who's going to pay for it?
Right. Exactly.
Usually the parent, regardless of what they say, they're still going to pay for it. I've been in this space for too long. But the same thing happens in other spaces of life. We can complain about it all day, but if something comes up, your parents are still going to take care of you. And that's just not a good space to be in perpetuity if we're talking about wealth creation and things of that nature and all that jazz. So,
so I ended up leaving Detroit and went to Nashville.
Okay.
And while I was in Nashville, got a job teaching high school math, still on that math thing, you know.
Gotcha.
But I still had that whole personal finance thing. So what I did was I enrolled in an accounting program at Belmont University.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah, and so it was an accounting, master's in accounting for people who did not have an undergraduate degree in accounting. So I was able to finish my master's in that master's program in 15 months. Went full time.
That's a lot to finish up an accounting program.
It was a lot.
Okay.
It was a lot. Yeah, I worked full time during the day and went to school full time at night.
Are you serious? Yeah. Dude, that's a lot. My undergraduate degree is in accountancy. That's a lot. And to retrain your brain to think like an accountant is supposed to think is probably one of the most difficult parts of that process. And you were able to do that in 15 months.
You know, and the thing is when I went, I had no idea what accounting was. So I just didn't know. But what I knew was that CPAs were considered financial experts. And so I wanted to be considered a financial expert. So I'm going to become a CPA, right? Which meant that I had to get some accounting credits in education. So I went to Belmont, got that accounting degree. I never did take the CPA exam. Okay. I did work in public accounting for a little while. Yeah. And I just realized that I couldn't sit at a desk all day.
I completely understand.
Yeah.
I completely get it.
But it gave me a really great foundation for understanding taxes. And I learned that I really, really like taxes. Yeah. And so, yeah. And so that's that kind of got me going.
Did your heart just palpitate a little bit? You just kind of drifted off. Your eyes got all dreary when you were thinking about taxes. I'm just like, yeah, you got it. It's in a cruel world. So evidently there's something going on here.
Yeah. So that's when I got into the tax world. Ended up working at an investment company for a while, worked in their retirement services department. And then I went to work for the IRS. I was an auditor for the IRS.
Oh, we got to stop. You know what, Dr. White, it was good having you on. But we don't, no, I'm joking. Actually, I'm a big proponent of understanding taxes and literally what your rights are when it comes to working with the IRS, because you actually do have rights. Yeah. So if you haven't done this and you're watching this, I want you to Google IRS Publication 1. That's it. Just read that right now and then learn what your rights are, because you do have rights. And a lot of people don't deal with their taxes in a proactive way because they're afraid of the IRS when they actually have a lot more power than they even know that they have when it comes to dealing with the IRS. So tell me more about the IRS, man.
It was great. I loved that job. I worked in the small business and self-employed group. And so I would go out and do audits of uh, companies or individuals that were self-employed and had revenue up to $10 million. So that's what
Okay.
IRS considers, small business to up to
Okay.
$10 million in revenue. Um, I learned so much, not just about taxes, but about business.
Hmm.
What just doing that job. I remember I audited a lumber yard, and then I also audited someone that was running a yoga business out of their home. And
Interesting.
so I got to understand, why people started businesses, how they started them, their whole um, operations, um, the accounting process that they went through, and man, I heard some really interesting stories that I use now. A lot of the things that I experienced with the IRS, I use in class now. I talk to my students about it.
I
Um,
love it.
yeah, and that was a great experience. It really was. And I got a chance to work with CPAs, with attorneys, with enrolled agents, and just which I'm an enrolled agent now, so I'm just gonna throw that shameless plug
Yeah,
out there.
please do. Please do. This is your life, bro. Shine, brother.
if you need,
Shine.
if anybody out there needs tax assistance, consider hiring an enrolled agent. They're usually really good with tax work.
Love it.
But yeah, it was great. I learned a lot in those years that I worked for the IRS. During that time, though, is when I really thought that if I don't go back and get that PhD and do the professor thing now, I'm never going to do it.
Interesting.
And because I knew I was getting kind of comfortable, I liked the job, I was getting other opportunities. I had got uh, an offer to go work for the FBI and
Oh,
forensic
wow.
accounting. And so I knew that if I didn't stop and go and pursue, my purpose and my passion and this professor thing, that I was never going to do it. And so I left the IRS and went to school full time at the Ohio State University. And that's where I got my PhD from.
Love it. So tell me a little bit about your when did you get clear on your purpose and your passion?
Oh, that's kind of a loaded question because I'm still getting some clarity about
I
things.
love it.
But the seed was planted back in undergrad,
Hmm.
and it just continued to grow. But I would do things like, well, if I just get a master's degree, I can teach at a community college, and that'll be okay. Or when I was still in Detroit, I was able to teach some of the lower level math classes in the math department, um, and that kind of satisfied me for a while. But I knew that in order to be a faculty member at a research university, I was going to have to get a PhD.
Okay.
Um, and so I would say, I would say during those years that I worked at the investment company, and then when I went to work for the IRS, it really started becoming clear that I wanted to work more with families and on their financial well-being, and just them understanding um, how to best uh, situate themselves to have a solid financial foundation, whether it be with their taxes or with their retirement planning or their investments. Uh, but those years really did it for me.
Interesting. So that passion of keeping family first and foremost. Um, was that something that was rooted to your childhood in terms of and I want to touch on this before we segue into the research. But in terms of your childhood and conversations that you had about money and things that nature and all that jazz, uh, did you see financial hardship, or was family something that was always a very integral part of your upbringing, which kind of maybe has a little bit of a thread into your passion? I'm just trying to connect this back.
Yeah. So we didn't where I lived. We didn't have much money, but I didn't really know always that we didn't have much money.
Gotcha.
You know, and so uh, living in Detroit. Detroit is a very, or when I was coming up in Detroit, it was I've been gone for a while, so uh, I'm not real certain of the dynamic now. But
Yeah.
at the time I was growing up, it was very much a, a city with just mostly, the majority of the population was African American. And so what I did know was uh, that we had less resources than the schools and the kids in the suburbs.
Gotcha.
And so, um, you know, I always wonder why.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
why is it that uh, why is it that the books that I have in school are like torn up and in many cases, and kind of we always get the books that are used and have been noticeably used.
Yeah.
But it's something that I noticed, but it's just kind of something you deal with, and it just is what it is. And
And
one of the things.
can
Go
I
ahead.
interrupt here really quickly? Would you say that you normalized it?
Probably, yeah.
And 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 I know we can go into a therapy conversation here, because again, you're from Detroit, I'm from Gary,
Yeah,
and there was so much, like like I say, it is what it is all the time.
yeah, yeah.
And my son's cross country coach, we were talking, and I said it is what it is after a race because Tristan didn't have the best race that race. I was like, it is what it is. He didn't put in enough work.
Yeah.
I'm like, we just put into work next week and see where we go. And he said, he was like, I see where he gets that from, right? And where that comes from for me is that whole idea of coping
Yeah,
and normalizing something, because there are sometimes we're in circumstances and situations that we don't have the power to fix.
yeah,
And it's just easier to normalize it than to think about what could possibly be done to do something better in some situations or circumstances. And I know I'm guilty of normalizing things that shouldn't be normalized. And I've had to do a lot of work in terms of rethinking how I think, or I used to think, um, about certain things. But I just think it's fascinating that even then you had moments where you noticed it.
yeah,
And I can even say now, especially the year that we just recently had, that there are kids who are in positions where they're noticing things. But I also think that too, with a lot of the public outcry and things of that nature, which is social injustice and all these other different things, it's giving them power to actually have a voice and not normalize things, but
right,
say, I'm going to speak out on it.
right.
Back in the day, though, when I was in the G and you're in Detroit,
Yeah,
right? It's just kind of like you can speak out on stuff all day, but I know I got weary very
yeah,
early on too, because just stuff wasn't changing.
yeah. I was going to probably the best K-8 school in the city of Detroit for during my middle school years. And I remember my mom wanted me to go to this private school in one of the nearby suburbs. And so I went and I took the test for the school, and they let me come over and stay a day, and go to classes and stuff. And they had carpet in the halls. They had a winding staircase, in the front door. When you enter the front door, it's a chandelier in the atrium, and you go in the lunchroom, and which is not a lunchroom or cafeteria like we had at my Detroit public school, but this is it's like a dining hall. They're eating off of real china. It was just a whole different experience. And I was there for a day, and I was just like, wow, this is nothing like the school that I go to. And they ended up offering me a partial scholarship to go there. So they would pay half, or they were going to give me a scholarship for half of the tuition. And I remember my mom saying, "Yeah, but we still can't afford it."
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's real nice.
Yeah. Like, the only way we can afford this is if they give you most of this.
I got you.
Most of the tuition. And so, it's just seeing things like that where I was kind of exposed to what the the other parts of our community or the metro area, how they were living versus what I had,
Interesting.
And I think that really kind of started opening my eyes to why is it that we're in this position financially?
Got you.
And why are they in that position financially?
Absolutely. So in other words, you have some households, some families that appear to be in a position of perpetual lack.
Yeah.
And nothing's changing.
Yeah.
And then you have other families and other communities that appear to be in a position to have perpetual abundance.
Yeah.
And where where is that gap? Like what's in the middle? Like, why is this happening? And I think this is a great segue into the article that you wrote along with Kimberly Watkins, Megan McCoy, Bertrana Marithi, did I pronounce that correctly? And Jamie Lynn Byram. And the title of it is How Financial Socialization Messages Relate to Financial Management, Optimism, and Stress. And what really triggered me in terms of wanting to read this article is because you also looked at this varying things by race as well, to see if there's some race differences. And if there are, what are those? So just to kind of start here, what is financial socialization?
Yeah, so to put it simply, financial socialization is how people learn about personal finance and how they develop the attitudes and behaviors about money that they have. And those can come from, most of the time, it is going to be how parents teach their children about money and instill the attitudes and help them to develop the habits and behaviors that they have. And that can come from, directly teaching, or it can come from observation.
Absolutely.
Or it can even come from things like experience, where a kid might have a job, and so they're getting money, and so they're having some experience with managing and dealing and handling, the money that they're getting, and so it can be one of those three things.
Absolutely.
And so that's what financial socialization is. And I can recall my dad always telling me as a kid, make sure you save some money. make sure you save some money. And that was always in the back of my mind. And that is kind of that thought, that message that I got from him was really the catalyst for the paper that you're talking about now.
Interesting. I love it.
Yeah.
So you said that stays in the back of your mind, and this is more of a personal question. Would you say that that messaging, even today, something that you heard in your youth, has a pretty significant impact on on your behaviors and your attitudes as it relates to the way that you manage your money?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
All right. I'm just
Absolutely.
always curious about that. In terms of you hear it, you internalize it. That's always the interesting thing, is like, how people internalize messages, and then ultimately what they do, and how they act on those messages. So you said three things really. It's someone. So financial socialization is this whole idea of how we teach or educate our children about money, and that can happen directly, and it can happen indirectly.
Yeah.
And I know that your paper didn't cover that, but could you possibly see where you could create angst in a child, where you're telling them the right thing directly, but indirectly you're doing all the wrong things.
Right.
Your energy and attitude when a bill comes in the mail or something like that is this another bill or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And or there's always something, right? Like you're trying to teach your children the right thing, but your experience and what you're indirectly communicating is kind of creating a little bit of friction against maybe a more optimal behavior.
Yeah. It's interesting that you brought that up. And as you were talking, I just thought about some other research that we've been working on. And what we're finding is that a lot of people are just not having financial conversations in the house. And so, people or families are not talking about money. And so if they're not talking about money, then in terms of socialization, kids are going to gravitate to the modeling because that's all they have is they're going to be observing what you're doing. And so, if you're not being, really explicit about delivering messages to your children about money, then they're going to get the message.
Yep.
But how much are you controlling that message by what you're either speaking to them or modeling for them?
You know what, Dr. White, I think that actually this is a great place to kind of pose that question to the audience and those who are listening to this message. What message are you modeling, or indirectly, right? Through body language, through just things that you say, how you respond about things as it relates to money. Like what messaging are you currently delivering to your children? And once you clarify what that is, do not discount, or let me not say discount, but do not for 1 second believe that messaging is not being taken to heart. Because based on what you're talking about, Dr. White, is that it's not just what we say, it's not just what somebody says, it's what we see.
Yeah.
Right? And if we're seeing that, that's actually creating a foundation of ideas about personal finance that kids are taking in, and they have them very early on. I think there was one article that talked about as early as 3 in some instances, right? Like when kids see their parents swiping a card, they think that money is magical money, and all I need to do is swipe. So you don't have to necessarily have a direct conversation to be having a conversation about money. However, let's talk about the explicit conversation piece of it, which is really where your paper kind of drives in, right? So I guess my main question here is, do these conversations have any type of impact on financial management. And when we say financial management, I guess we're talking about, you know, whether we're budgeting, whether we're tracking and things, tracking our expenses, things of that nature.
Yeah, and there was one other component in that index, because those were actually three different indexes that we created there. But there was another component to that, which is the financial self-efficacy piece,
Okay.
or
Yep.
confidence in being able to manage their finances. So it's, are you budgeting? Are you tracking your spending? Are you tracking your transactions in terms of checks at the and your bank account? And then how confident are you that you can actually manage your finances?
Absolutely.
Those are all components of that financial management.
Okay. And then we also had the financial stress component as well, which I'm looking at it here. So I have some of these items that you have listed here, and these were stressed about finances in general, worry about current monthly expenses, worrying about paying for school, enough money for activities or same or similar activities as peers, and then enough money for activities I can enjoy.
Yeah.
Okay. And so for this study in particular, we're looking at college age students.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. College
Okay.
age. Yeah.
And then there's also the financial optimism piece, which is optimistic about future, support myself financially. Whether or not college is a good investment, which I think is a very good question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So in those domains, do financial socialization messages, do they actually relate to management, optimism, and stress?
Yes. I'm going to say yes, and then I'm going to offer a little further insight. And
Let's do.
so the message. So here's the takeaway. Here's the takeaway. Messaging matters.
Okay.
The messaging that matters the most is encouraging your children to invest. So there were three messages that we looked at. We looked at, do parents encourage their kids to save money? Do parents encourage their kids to have a bank account?
Yep.
And then do parents encourage their kids to invest their money?
Yep.
That investing message was significant, had a significant impact on financial management, financial stress, and financial optimism. So what happens is that the kids that receive the financial or receive the message from their parents encouraging them to invest their money, they had higher scores in the financial management index. They had less stress on average than other students, and they had greater financial optimism on average than other students. And so it affected each category. So I'm gonna go back to my dad's message of make sure you save some money, which is a good message. And you know, like I said, it stayed with me. But there's two things. One is he didn't tell me how to save.
How much? Where to save it?
Exactly. Neither did he tell me what to do with it when I saved it, which that investing message gets to. What do you do with the money? And another thing about the investing message, it has to go into also the time value of money and just understanding over time, if you invest money and you are able to just let it grow, it's going to do a couple things. It's going to be worth more today. I mean, going to be worth more in the future than it is today. And also, you'll probably, I'm going to say probably because there's no guarantees here, right? But,
Of course.
you're probably going to be able to preserve your purchasing power and beat inflation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which honestly, if you're not having the conversation in terms of why you invest, then you don't really have a conversation about purchasing power.
Right.
Therefore, you don't really understand inflation.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I can guarantee you there's somebody who's going to be watching this video who has $100 or $1,000 under their bed or in a shoebox or in a book on a bookshelf somewhere.
Or in an envelope.
Or in the envelope. Exactly. So see, you try to take us down a different road. I saw the shade. I felt the shade. And the issue is that if you just leave that money there,
Yeah.
it actually has a negative consequence on how much you can actually buy with that money later. Because as you mentioned, inflation is eating it up.
Right.
Right. But these are all like big picture understandings that as an adult you should be aware of, right?
Yeah.
if you want to manage your money well, but to your point that you made earlier is that if people generally and parents aren't generally having these conversations, then where is the space really to kind of tease that out, right? And to have that conversation about these big picture things, which then kind of leads me to another point here. So, because again, if we're going to talk about investing, we have to talk about all the nuances of investing.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not just putting your money into this bucket and letting it sit. It's the why, it's the how, it's the where, to your point. Right? Save, but how do I, and what shall I expect in doing this? Right. And even to your point, in terms of your background, what are the tax consequences? Exactly. Right? Then we could talk about short-term, long-term gains, why certain individuals who are wealthy and their compensation is through stocks, why do they do it that way? Yeah. Right? Is because they're expecting to pay a lower tax rate on long-term gain earnings. So it's not a secret. Right? This is just a part of the financial system. It's no secret. It's just that once you understand these things, then you're like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Right? If I'm in a position, I would probably do that too, reasonably. So we have this conversation, and if we say that families aren't talking, what are we seeing as it relates to Black communities or communities of, or persons of color as it relates to these conversations? And let me step back a little bit. I guess my first question is, do you believe that we're not having these conversations about investing in households because of participation rates as it relates to investing? One, because if you're not investing, why would you be confident to share information about investing? Yeah. And then secondly, as it relates to financial socialization messaging, what are we seeing as it relates to the Black community, persons of color in general?
Yeah. So I'll say this, in terms of that saving message, that African-American families reported reported the least or the smallest percentage of families were giving their kids that saving message, or students have received that saving message. Let me put it that way.
And these are college students.
These are college students.
So now we're not parsing out first generation and students who are coming from back and things of that nature. And there could definitely potentially be something there.
Exactly.
Differences between those two. But it's interesting to me that when we're looking at maybe students who are going to college and from families who are encouraging or driving this theme of you need to go to college,
Right.
that we're still seeing lower rates
Right.
as it relates to having a savings conversation.
Right. And that's an important point, that these are college students. There's a whole group of individuals out there that are in this same age category that are not in college that we didn't look at. So, just keep in mind that these are college students. But, the Black students, they had lower percentages in terms of receiving that saving message. Also with the banking message, the Black students were they received that banking message at a lower percentage, along with Hispanics. So if you expand it to race and culture, the Hispanics also, in terms of banking, received less than 80% of the Hispanic students said that they had received a message about banking. And then in terms of investing, I thought that this was pretty interesting. The Asian students in the population reported the highest percentage of having received the investing message. So as a whole, from when you went from saving and banking down to investing, it was almost half. It reduced the percentage of students who actually received the investing message by half. So whereas it was up in the 70 and 80% when you talk about students that had received a saving or banking message, students that said that their parents had encouraged them to invest money was down around, the highest was 42%. Yeah. And that was from the Asian community. Yeah. From the Asian students. And all the others were less than 30%. And wow. in terms of who received the least amount of messages about investing, it was the Hispanic group. The Hispanic group, they were right about 25% of Hispanic students said that they had received that message from their parents encouraging them to invest their money.
So overall, in general, looking at the investing conversation message by race, we're looking at less than 30% for everyone except for the Asian community.
Except for the Asian community.
That's fascinating. And I don't think that your research actually was geared toward teasing this out. Because I noticed something interesting within the data here when we were looking at education. So for instance, mother's education, and with, I guess, high school being the baseline. So we're comparing everything on top of that and seeing how it differs. And then father's education. And then as I was looking at this, I noticed that financial stress was increased significantly. It was financial management. Hold on, what was it here? Let me make sure. I think I saw here, okay, so it was mother's high school education, and this was actually kind of interesting. So education beyond that of high school, it looked as if at the bachelor's degree, master's degree, and professional degree, and please let me know if I'm reading this or interpreting this incorrectly, that financial management was less than that of a high school graduate.
Say that one more time for me.
All right, so as I'm looking at this, it looks here, so the beta coefficient for some, not for some college, but let me say a bachelor's degree is negative 0.235. And then the p-value is 0.018 for a bachelor's degree.
Right, yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was kind of fascinating to me in terms of that there seems to be this sense of, if I have higher education, I don't have to be as mindful
Yeah.
of financial management. So there's actually a negative association here. As someone gets more education, they guess there's a more of a sense of security.
Yeah.
So this, and that's the weird thing about this piece.
Yeah.
So we educate people with the hopes of that now you know all this great information that you're going to go educate your families more. But that was just kind of interesting as it relates to that with mothers in education, because I know that there's studies that look at who does the financial socialization in a household. And generally that tends to fall on mothers more so than it does dads.
Yeah. And you also have to think about too, though, that that if what goes into that financial management piece,
Good point.
budgeting, um, tracking your spending,
Yep.
and if education is really correlated with income, then if you have more income, then maybe you aren't budgeting. Maybe you aren't uh, necessarily tracking your spending like someone that with less education and less income might need to. Um, yeah. So, and also you could think about also that that whole idea of remember self-efficacy was a part of that also.
Yeah.
So the more you know, the less confident you might be that you can actually do this. Like,
Interesting.
yeah,
And I mean, it's fascinating to me because, again, when I think about studies that I've looked at here, especially as it relates to who does the financial socialization in a household, whether it's mom or dad, their dad doesn't really pop on the scale a whole lot as it relates to this particular study. Mom does as it relates to higher levels of education. But if you would speak to that, do you think it's important for both mother and father to communicate and to be sure that they're modeling similar messages or messaging as it relates to money?
oh, of course, yeah. I mean, I think just in general, if you have two voices spitting out the same message, it's going to be more powerful than having one voice and then some kind of maybe conflicting voice in the in the house. Um, yeah, and so it definitely can be done with one parent, but when you have two voices, it's going to make it just that much better. A unified voice. Yeah.
Exactly. And Kenneth, that leads me to this bigger point, right? Because you said, generally speaking, earlier that most people just aren't having the conversation with their children about money. Anything that they're receiving is through modeling or it's indirectly happening. But then what we also know is that a lot of spouses and a lot of couples aren't having conversations or healthy conversations about money. So,
Right.
as I'm thinking about this, I'm seeing how this bottling up at the top, because if I can't have a healthy conversation with my spouse or my partner about money, how then do we ever expect to engage in financial socialization in a way that's going to be healthy and is
Right.
going to share a consistent message about the optimal ways to handle and to deal with money?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why you're my hero, because I know you live this thing and not just talk about it.
This isn't about me. This is about you. Because we were just, all right, so I know Dr. White, obviously. We're colleagues at the University of Georgia. And we were actually supposed to record this earlier, but we couldn't because I forgot that my wife and I were supposed to have our budgeting meeting for the year that we do at the end of every year, budgeting for the next year and all that jazz. But this is the thing, though, Dr. White, you and I both know that you can be doing things, but that doesn't mean that I can verify that it's optimal, right?
Right. Yeah.
Both of my boys have had investment accounts starting at the age of 7.
Mhm.
Both of them. So we have this conversation. But the fact that you bring up that having the investment conversation proves to be a more favorable way to promote financial management, to
Yeah.
decrease stress, and encourage financial optimism provides me with some relief to say, all right, I'm doing this and I'm moving in the right direction.
Right.
This might not be, it
Right.
might not be causal, meaning that we can say that we can actually directly tie these things together and say that it's an association at this point. But still, this is pretty powerful stuff. And it makes me feel good that we're not shying away from encouraging the full breadth of what it means to understand money
Mhm.
from our kids.
Yeah.
We've started these conversations early.
And I'm gonna just add another layer to that is that the message of investing is uh, it, it provides that higher financial management. It provides less financial stress or encourages or um, is related to less financial stress and is related to more financial optimism when the kids get to college age uh, in general. But for African American students, when you interact race with that message, for African American students, it means so much more.
Mm.
It it just they had greater increases in financial management. They had greater decreases in financial stress. They had greater increases in financial optimism. And so for African American families, it's so much more important that you talk to and encourage your kids to save, to invest their money and not just save their money. And so, say I don't want to kind of downplay the saving message, but I definitely want to emphasize and upplay the investing message.
But this is my thing, Dr. White. If you're saving,
Yeah.
where are you saving it?
Where are you saving? Yeah.
So for me, regardless of, so when we have it, and this is the thing, I think that we put savings into a bottle, right?
Right.
Because you and I we were just talking about not too long ago inflation and the impact that it has on purchasing power. So if you're saving money and we're actually having a holistic conversation about big picture economic concepts and all these other different things, whatever, and which kind of comes second nature to us because we've engaged in this so much.
Yeah.
But if you're going to have the savings conversation as a parent, then this may be a great opportunity to infuse that. Hey, if we're going to have that conversation, then we have to have the conversation about inflation.
Absolutely.
Right? Base level. Because then if your children are anything like my children, and you say, if I just put my money here and some force is going to come and eat away at it, their next question is going to be, what can I do so this doesn't happen? So this isn't it is what it is moment.
Yeah.
This isn't a normalized situation. This then becomes, all right, well, what are our options? What are our other vehicles? And you and I both know, if anybody knows about potentially mitigating inflation risk, it's grandmas. Because they're the first one to get you a savings bond.
Right, exactly.
Like I gotta do you know how many college students I have tell me yeah, I think I got a savings bond. My grandma got that for me when I was a baby.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
conceptually we get it, but we're not having the conversation, which then leads into ultimately, where do I save optimally?
Yeah.
And then investing is kind of like that next step.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love the way you brought that back around to not just what these messages mean to the general population, but how this messaging means even more to the Black community.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a big piece here, and I'm going to put this out here after kind of reading through the study a little bit, that I think would be a great addition to this study, is looking at entrepreneurship and home ownership messaging, especially as it relates to the current climate today. So when we were looking at race and then looking at saving, no yes, banking, no yes, investing, no yes. And please let me know when you do this. I'd love to be on this paper, but I would love to see entrepreneurship and home ownership in terms of whether or not those conversations are being driven, because I'm seeing a lot of that now on social media and other spaces in terms of ownership. But do you think with investing that ownership piece means something? Beyond just the growth on or returns that you're going to get from investing, but to actually say, especially as we were talking about, you and I growing up in Gary and Detroit and feeling as if, I'm thinking about kids right now in Flint, Michigan, where they were having an issue with the water and all that jazz, right? You don't feel like you own anything.
Right. Yeah.
Like everything just kind of outside of your control.
Yeah.
But could investing actually promote optimism and hopefulness, because it provides someone with a sense of ownership, even when they're in the midst of situations where they feel like they don't own anything?
Yeah. And I think when we talk about investing, so much of that goes to the thought just goes to, I'm going to invest in the stock market, but there's other things you can invest in. You can do real estate investing.
Absolutely.
And so where you actually have a tangible home or apartment, a single family home or apartment building. So that sense of ownership then is real, because you can go and look at this structure that you have. I mean, you can, if you don't want to invest in an actual structure, you can invest in a real estate investment trust and invest in real estate that way. But I think that sense of ownership, if it's presented that way, like, if you're investing in individual stocks, you own a piece of whatever company you're investing in. Or if you are investing in bonds, like you brought up bonds, you're not owning anything, but you're actually lending people money. Or
like that's power.
Money. Yeah.
That's power. If you man, I love that we're having this conversation. And because I think that there, especially as it relates to men, and this is a very different dynamic here, there's this association of power and money and control and all these other different things that can kind of manifest itself. But when you're coming from disadvantaged situations and you feel powerless, to be able to say that I have the capacity to loan my federal government money because they need it, that's a powerful message. And and to me, it makes you feel as if I have some say. I have some say here. Like, I'm a part of this just as much as anybody else. And it's not just people say, oh, I pay my taxes and whatever it may be. No. You have power even if you're not just paying your taxes. You have power even as a child to say that I am going to give to my federal government. Like, dude, can you imagine?
My federal government, a municipality.
Absolutely. The city and corporation.
Yeah. And so,
a country.
What?
A country.
A country, right. Exactly.
So and so the beautiful thing about this conversation that we're having isn't just the sheer act of having an investing conversation, a saving conversation, or a banking conversation. It lends itself to the opportunity to understand the systems in which we navigate.
Yes.
Because until we effectively understand the systems, then once we understand the systems, we understand the game that we're playing. Then when we understand the game that we're playing, we then can feel even more confident to say that, all right, I get this. I see how these things connect, and I can engage in this like anyone else can.
Yeah. And, you know, and if you think about it just from a historical perspective, African Americans were locked out of the system for so
Yes.
long. And so to understand, to then participate in investing
Yes.
and to learn the system, then can help with the levels of trust that you might have in the system. But just knowing, like you were saying, knowing how to play the game is going to provide me a little less stress,
Absolutely.
provide me a little more optimism.
Especially when it's with, because we're talking about your money.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
money is an emotional thing. And nobody just wants to put their money into something blindly.
right.
And we're just hoping that something's going to happen. Like when you invest and when I invest, it's not blind faith.
No,
Like this is like nobody, if you listen to any millionaires or billionaires speak, none of them like to lose money.
right.
Like
Yeah,
they don't have billions of dollars because they're in the game of losing money. They're
yeah,
taking calculated risk and they want to be as assured as they possibly can that this is going to yield me a 3, 4, 5-fold return in the long run. It's not blind faith.
yeah. You know, I was I was talking to one of my colleagues and friend about opening up an investment account, just a brokerage account, you know, and doing some investing. And she said one thing, and I knew from that one statement that she didn't really understand investing. She was like, you know, so can I lose money? I don't want to lose money. And I mean, the nature of investing is that yes, your money is at risk, and you know you can lose money. But if you are not doing it, you know, not doing your investing blindly, then you can kind of temper that risk, and,
Absolutely.
but it's gonna still be there, you know.
There is. And there's natural volatility.
Yeah,
But the volatility, and again, we're not going to get deep into this, whatever, but the volatility doesn't always mean that fundamentally a company is not profitable.
right,
It could be COVID-19,
right,
right?
right.
It could be a hurricane. It
Could be
could
a
be the
news
US
report.
and China. You know, you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
Actually, it can be an influencer on social media
yes,
who says that, oh, you want to get out of X, Y, and Z because I heard some news. And you
yeah.
literally will see a disruptive shift. And that could totally not be the case,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Has
So
nothing to do with the fundamentals of the company. Yeah.
nothing at all. And when we say fundamentals, we're just talking about a company's budget,
Yeah.
right? How much debt do they have? How much cash flow do they have? Where are they spending their expenditures? How are they making money? That's it. And the beautiful thing about budgeting and financial management is that when you manage your own money, it makes it easier to actually look at a company's financials, even if you don't know anything about financials,
Yeah.
because you start to see very similar things. They're just labeled a little differently, right? So, Dr. Wright, we talked about a lot. I appreciate you sharing a lot of great information about you growing up in Detroit, because we have that Midwest connection. You going to Wayne State, definitely putting the HBCU out on the map here, and then you actually being very honest about your trajectory in life, and that it wasn't like this linear path.
No, not at
It's
all.
like you've bounced around a little bit, and you've found your way, and
Yeah.
like you said earlier, you're still clarifying things and you're still growing, and who knows what the next 10 years are going to look like, but you've committed to being of service to others, thinking about families, and then really going back to the first thing that you mentioned earlier is closing that gap between a haves and a have-nots. Like, what are the whys here? And I think one of the really big whys here, especially as it relates to persons of color, more specifically the Black community, is that having conversations about investing or investments is a really, really important thing to have with our children. And I think that that's powerful. So my
Yeah.
question to you is this: do you have any suggestions on ways that families should engage in having the conversation?
Yeah. So let me just say first, you got to talk to your kids about money. You got to talk to your kids about investing.
Yeah.
You got to do it. Um, and so, there's some ways that it can be done. One is you can just start by watching the news or uh, reading news articles with them, it's so that you're educating yourself, and at the same time you can start this conversation with the kids. There's organizations out there um, that that you can go to. I know Junior Achievement is one of them.
Mm.
I don't know how much are we supposed to plug organizations.
Yeah, yeah. Like, dude, this is free content, bro. I'm not getting paid for this. we're just trying to actually to do something to actually move the needle a little bit,
Yeah,
to spark curiosity, and then I'll have some future conversations about like investing, um, some basic things
yeah.
that households can do to talk about it in a responsible way. So we'll definitely have that conversation. So I don't want to put you on the spot with that, but Junior Achievement could definitely be a great
Yeah,
organization.
I mean, Junior Achievement is about entrepreneurship for the most part, but they also have some basic money management kind of things in there. Um, one of the things that I really look forward to is just more school districts and the public schools talking or getting more into this whole financial literacy and financial education. Um, that's I think that's going to be powerful, where families might still be kind of lagging in terms of having those conversations. If kids can go to school and get a conversation about it, then they can come home and talk to their parents about it too.
And then
Uh,
act on it,
yeah,
right? Because I know you'd mentioned that experiential piece,
yeah,
because you and I both know talking about it and then doing something with your own money are two very different things. Or with someone else's money.
yeah. And one of the things too, though, is that most employers now will offer some kind of retirement plan for their employees, some kind of 401k, 403b. That can be a great um, conversation piece for families. If you just talk about what you're doing in terms of retirement through
Yeah.
your employer with your kids. Hey, I got this 401k that I'm using, some target date fund in. Oh, what's a target date fund?
Have the
Yeah,
conversation.
you're having these conversations, and that conversation, that's a conversation about investing.
Yes.
Uh, yeah. And so, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that brings up a really good point, Dr. White. Um, Money conversations generally are taboo.
Hmm.
Okay. So from employee to employee, most people don't say, oh, I earn this, I earn this, right?
Yeah.
From parent to child, most parents don't say, this is what I gross for the year. Most children, when they become adults, don't generally share how much they gross for the year. It can be grandparents, so on and so forth. So if we are not, if we don't have a culture where we are comfortable with just sharing the numbers, like how do we ever really get over that hump, right? Like it's like there's a stigma to say, oh, well, come look at my investment portfolio. You see, like
Right.
your 7-year-old child, we have $500,000 sitting in this investment portfolio, and we earned this year about 16%. But
Right.
now you don't go to school and tell nobody.
Right. Yeah.
but still, though, we don't have conversations. Even when we think about wills and estate planning from wealthier families, most children who are married don't know how much their parents have
Right.
or how much they should reasonably expect.
Yeah.
And if we're not having these conversations intergenerationally, or I like to call it intra, because I like to think of the family dynamic as a whole and not these separate parts,
Right.
that then builds this bigger pie that we're all working to when we're all trying to build wealth, instead of it just being one person's responsibility to do it, because that's just unrealistic for the vast majority of households. But if we all have a wealth creation mindset and we're working together, then that means that we need to be open and transparent about where we are. Because if I'm doing something that's working and you're not,
Right. Right.
you can learn that from me, or vice versa. And we never even go there. So the bigger question is that, yeah, we need to have these investment conversations, but we won't even share how much we get paid with our kids. Don't be counting my dollars. No, you can't have that when we go to the supermarket.
Yeah. 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 That's true. Yeah. Yeah, and these, for you and I, these conversations are normal. I tell people, I talk about money every day of my life, whether it's having, teaching a class at the university, or having a conversation with a colleague, or through some research that I'm doing. Every day of my life, I have some kind of thought or conversation about money, some kind of communication about money. And so it's just natural for me. And so if somebody asks me a question about money, I don't feel like it's an intrusion, or I don't feel like it's something that is taboo and we shouldn't talk about, because I'm comfortable with these conversations. And we should get comfortable with these conversations in the household. I like what you said. You don't go to school and tell your friends, we got $500,000. How you like that?
My dad got more money than your dad.
Right. But within the house, I wonder if that came from not wanting to burden the kids with the financial pressures and things like that.
I definitely see that.
Under,
but to your point though, I think it's so incredibly important also, because if we're not exposing them to like potential financial pressures, we're not exposing to like the financial joys either.
Right.
So it's not just one side of the coin. And like you mentioned earlier, even though I'm not directly talking about financial pressures, I could be indirectly modeling that all day. There's no way to indirectly model wealth.
Yeah.
Like even if you have a big home or if you have a nice car, it doesn't mean you're wealthy. That's just a perception.
Does not mean.
Right. So you can't model wealth. You actually have to have a conversation about it. You actually have to calculate it. Like you're talking like time value of money concepts, things of that nature. Like, because you can't just see wealth.
Yeah.
Like on paper you can if you share that information, but it's not. Most of what we see is an illusion.
Yeah, it is.
Like most people don't have wealth. Like the numbers bear that out, I think, pretty clearly. Yeah. It's an illusion of wealth, but then that is indirectly, right, creating a paradigm or a mindset in terms of, well, if I have these things, then I'm X.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, because we need to look at your balance sheet and look at your assets and your liabilities and all these things, kind of work things out, whatever it may be. So I think in having this conversation and about investing and the impact that it has on decreasing stress, financial management, and even financial optimism, which I think is really, really, really important. That I think that what we're doing right now is actually kind of teasing out these subtle nuances that we can continue to build on this conversation. All right. So if you all are liking this conversation, I'm going to do the standard YouTube thing. Click like, subscribe, share, leave your comments. We'd love to hear your feedback on a lot of these different things. And Dr. White, I've held you long enough, and I can go on for hours because I love talking about this stuff just as you do. And I know there's some themes that we didn't dive into really, really clearly in terms of, how to invest or how to like dig into that conversation. We're going to have that conversation. But I just think big picture, understanding that it's important to have the conversation is at least a start. So before we close, is there anything that I didn't touch on that you would love to make sure that people leave this conversation knowing or feeling or trusting?
Um, yeah. If you're ever in Detroit, get over to Buddy's Pizza.
Oh, boom. Actually, all right, boom, Buddy's Pizza. Well, I got it. I'm writing it down. Do you have a good, let's say a starter book that you like to recommend to people if they're saying, I just want to start at a very low level, not into the details, not Benjamin Graham's Intelligent Investor or anything like that, because that gets way into the weeds and it's too much for someone who doesn't have a basic understanding of things. Do you have a base book recommendation?
My favorite book is The Richest Man in Babylon.
The Richest Man in Babylon. Oh,
That's my favorite book. And it's my favorite book because it takes a fictional character and talks about his experiences, and it teaches us real practical concepts about how to manage money and invest money.
whoa.
And yeah, it
Just keep it simple.
it's the most simple thing. It has the most simple message, but it's impactful and it's a powerful book.
So, all right, I'm going to, so with the Modem platform here on YouTube, we're gonna continue to kind of like do this series somewhere in between where we get researchers to come on and talk about different things. But I'm also going to do a book club of different book recommendations and stuff like that, where I just invite a lot of people who want to join, and we'll do this and we'll just talk about a book. And if you're okay with it, I would love to invite you to come back so that we can talk about Richest Man in Babylon, maybe in a month or two. And I'll put this out there to folks on my social media feeds and things of that nature to see if they want to join us. And we'll just come together and have a conversation and talk about what we've learned collectively together and how we can, again, start to have that conversation. And Dr. White, I don't know if you're feeling this energy. I'm sending it to you. But we are basically having the conversation right now that I think that is going to prompt a lot of conversations. And we'll continue to fill in some details as we go throughout the year. But I think that this is a great start. So thank you for taking the time to be a part of this. What's that?
Book club.
I know, right, man? Hey, because this is the thing. There are no secrets.
Yeah.
Like, really, there are no secrets. Like, all the information that anybody needs to take the steps that they need is already out there. You and I think, are further along in this journey where we've actually taken that information, applied that information, and gotten over the mountain a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that we can continue to have these conversations and use our social capital to fill in that void of trust while people are still trying to figure out if this is going to work or not. And, and the beautiful thing is, like, I'm not trying to sell anybody anything.
No.
This is not I'm about to sell you a manual or a product or whatever it may be. This is how can we keep this simple so that then people can actually take action and then they can actually see real results just a little bit of a time that will snowball into something much greater.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you. And to all of you who are watching, until next time, you have more power than you think. Own it. And if you haven't visited us on Instagram, go to Instagram, and my handle is @Modem Solutions. You can find me there. Dr. White, if somebody's wanting to find you on LinkedIn, social media, Facebook, wherever it may be, where can they find you?
I am on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So you can always find me on LinkedIn, or you can check us out on am I supposed to shout out UGA's website?
You can go dogs. You can shout out UGA website.
Go dogs. UGA, the financial planning website. You can find me there also.
So if somebody's going to find you on LinkedIn, is it Kenneth?
I think it's KJ White.
KJ White. Kenneth
Yeah.
J. White. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Michael Thomas, Michael G. Thomas Jr. And we look forward to connecting with you all. Dr. White is doing some amazing research in his space and in his area. So if you're wanting to dig deeper into research, especially this paper that we have here, I should have it all marked up. You can go to Google Scholar and just click in Google Scholar and then put in how financial socialization messages relate to financial management, optimism, and stress variations by race. It will come up. Definitely download it, read it, cite it, use that information. And some of the other researchers that were in the paper, Kimberly Watkins, Megan McCoy, Bertrana, Jamie Lynn, are all amazing researchers as well. So make sure that you check them out and stay connected and stay in the loop, because they have a lot more great work that's going to be coming out. And hopefully I'll have some work coming out as well. Y'all take care. Bye.